GM. GM. So I want to cover areas where I would look at getting bullish, lower time frame on the alts again. So if you've seen daily levels, I'm basically going to focus on Bitcoin and ETH for now. So remaining fully spot long, because I do think on a higher time frame view, these structures are going to form bottoms soon. And maybe even now, this might be the beginning of it. I think that Bitcoin is still weaker though. ETH had a nicer reaction. ETH had a nice pop there, squeeze up. It maybe has to come back down one more time and form a proper bottom like that. And then we can start to move higher. But regardless, I want to look at AKT and the others. So I'm now going to focus on shorter term trades, as I think the majority of the market's moves are done for now. Let me put it that way. Which means I think that stuff like AKT probably has to move like this if it's going to go up, and that's if it's going to hold at a bullish state. It probably has to form a proper bottom of some description. And I say it like this because there will be rallies and there will be moments at which it seems like it's back. But unless it flips the daily bands back into strength, which I don't see happening anytime very soon, but if it did, that's what you'd start to look at, a move towards the resistance above. Now the thing with this is it has put in progressively lower highs so far. So I would first be looking at a move from, 350 to 5 and just trading it that way. If it's going to break out and go higher, I will just take the same trade but at the breakout, because I don't know when that's going to be now. The period to just buy and hold for me was June all the way through March, and then the May lower high bounce. That lower high bounce was fine if it had have come down and confirmed support. So if AKT had come down and confirmed this as a range low, then it's cool. It's just a range trade. That's fine. It's going to reaccumulate. It's going to consolidate, whatever. But it didn't. It went lower. So now I would look at it more from a low time frame perspective. So keep it really simple, whether it's now or later. And I'll take the paths off because I don't think the paths are helpful here. The daily bands need to flip back to green. Now what tends to happen in a price action perspective is it will first test them, reject from them. The bands will then start to move closer together, and it will eventually get to a point where it's squeezing in them and it will get above. Right? And at this point, the bands will get tighter and tighter and tighter. They will start off as wide and they'll get tight, and then it will flip them. And then eventually the bands will get green, and by that point, hopefully you're in an uptrend or in an early uptrend. So that's AKT. I see that as being weeks away. So again, I look at Bitcoin, I look at ETH. They have much better setups in the near term. They obviously have more demand, more flows. And so if I want to hold anything for the next 4 or 5 weeks, it's going to be one of those two. Now, if you're not me and you're not short-term minded and you're not able to change your trades every day, right? If you have a higher time frame view and you bought some cash, think of it this way. I suspect that in probably 2 months, right? And this is based off when bottoms tend to form in the whole market. So let's look at a few examples for a cash, and then we'll look at some other. We'll look at total 3 as well, because I want to be clear about this. Let's imagine that today is the absolute bottom, okay? So if it was the absolute bottom over there, it took about 2 months, 50 days, for it to get back above the bands of green. But to make a breakout, it took about 60 days. 2 months, right? Over here, it flipped right back into, flipped right back into an uptrend. But the confirmation of the breakout was 2 weeks after, right? So it rallied up, but it only rallied up into resistance. And then the breakout was 2 weeks later. I think we're more like somewhere over here, we're in that place somewhere, which again, I expect this is probably what's going to happen. 2 months, it's going to bleed. If you just go back to where we're at now, I think that's kind of where we're at. We're at this phase here where it's probably going to do that and then start to rise. Now, let's say that is the path. And let's just say it's 2 months. Okay. Go ahead, 60 days or whatever, and price starts to rise up again in August and in September. You have to then ask yourself, should I be altering my own portfolio just because Michael's doing it? Should I be doing it in the next 2 months? Because I'm probably not going to re-enter a cash and just say, okay, that's it now, back in, hold it for 6 months again. I'll probably just trade it. Right? And I'll also, because the way I trade is different, like I might not touch it at all until it breaks out. But that means I'll miss from $3 to $7. But I don't care, because if my system is just to trade an all-time high breakout and I enter it and risk manage it, then for me, that's fine. But if you're working and you've DCA'd and you bought a cash and you've held it and you got in at $1 or $2 and you want to just hold it till the end of the bull and it ends up eventually going to $10 or $20, then fucking around here does not make sense for you. Do not copy what I'm doing unless you're going to trade the way I trade. And you probably don't have 12 hours a day to analyze charts and trade different ways. And, I want to be very, very clear about that. I don't think that holding no coins is a good idea. I just think that holding Bitcoin and ETH currently will outperform the altcoins, right? So that's a cash for me. I don't see any immediate trades. I don't see any immediate bullish moves. So I'm happy to just hold. Even if I just wanted to rebuy my spot, if I saw it do this, I would feel much, much better at rebuying it here in September. And it's at the same price. And you might say, oh, well, why did you could have just kept holding it. Of course you could have. But you don't know how it's going to go. It could go like that. It could go down. It could go up and back. It could go a million different directions. Just what the charts are telling me right now. Bounces are probably close because these are pretty oversold. But I think that similarly to how bounces were close over here when it's oversold, right? It was also oversold here, and it did bounce, and then it came back, and then it did this and this and this. And I always like to see the daily bands compress first and then flip green, right? The width, how wide apart the daily bands are, is always a tell for me. And they're about as wide as they can be right now. So that's like the equivalent of over here. I'd rather see it come in and compress on them before starting to take a higher time frame view. Now let's go total 3 and just look at alts in general. The same thing's happening here. The bands are fully, dispersed. Total 3 is holding at this higher time frame, what you could call a support. But for me, it's first going to have to push into them. It's probably going to reject the first time. It's then going to come back up. The bands will squeeze. It'll start to get above them. And so I look at this and think it's probably a month away, probably 3 weeks away. And that's if the bottom is right now. Yeah. In every instance, the bands do compress, right? The bands will come up and they will compress. It's super oversold. It comes in, it compresses on them. They flip green. Has a bit of an uptrend. That time it comes all the way back. So the downside risks are higher. The upside risks are lower. Or rewards are lower. Bowden. So this one is just completely wrecked. And the opportunity for reversal, which was happening intraday a couple of days ago, has failed entirely. And again, do I think there'll be a trade on Bowden? Yes. Do I think there will eventually be a reversal? Yes. But until there is at least a lower time frame set up, for me, I would trade Bowden on the lower time frame, like the 4 hour, which is where I was seeing the signs of some strength showing in here after the initial reversal, but it failed. And that was part of my trade plan. Invalidation was there, invalidation was hit, trade's closed. So next time I see it, have a move up, hold on the 4 hour bands and consolidate and make a higher high. When I start to see it do this, 4 hour higher highs and higher lows, that's where I consider then possibility of a short-term trade, because when it does build up some short-term momentum, there's plenty of room above. The first resistance above is 20 cents. Above that, we've got sort of in between, split the difference at 30, and then you've got 40. So it has the round numbers. And I'm only using this CoinX chart because I can have the bands on it. I think that after it's able to get above this 13, 14 cents level, I think that's a support resistance to flip. So the 4-hour bands get into an uptrend, get above this 13, 14, and I think then there's quite an easy trade into 20, and if it flips that on up to 30. And I would view it from a lower time frame perspective, as it's just sold down into here. If the bottom comes soon, leading towards the debate, which is only a few days away now, it might be too soon for any significant rally into the debates, unless we see something like this kind of move here. But that would require a deeper flush. It has to first have a capitulation, which it hasn't had yet. It's kind of grinding. If it actually collapsed down to 5 cents and started to show life, that's when you can start to see a bigger reaction. So again, on every time frame, it's currently bearish. The 4-hour bands were actually briefly green the other day. They were crossing green on the DEX screener chart, but then it didn't confirm. It got reversed. And so Bowden, no trades there. Trump, same thing. Trump has just retraced now fully back to where it started. So I would say this is the beginning of a lengthy reaccumulation phase. Just something like that has happened again. Unless something different comes along, that's what's going to most likely happen. It's going to have to consolidate, eventually build its way back up above the bands. And I think the simplest thing is wait for a range to form. Wait for range to form, get your range high, wait for the flip. That's when it gets bullish. So that's as simple for me, the Trump coin. And with these moves then, the way I'll trade them is just with that next impulse in mind. Right, the buy and hold approach for me at this stage of the market makes less sense, because I'm active every day in the market, and I'm also happy with where my portfolio is at, and I don't need to push a lot of risk. And so again, you might not be in that position. You might want to do other things. You might want to hold longer term. You might want to play lower cap meme coins to try and catch bigger moves. Everyone trades differently, right? I'm happy to be predominantly Bitcoin ETH and then trade around that altcoins in rotation. And so that was Bowden, Trump, and then Apu is the other one. So Apu, for me, needs to go, it is going lower. Where's the full Apu chart? Because Apu, yeah. Ignore all the wicks. This trading view chart has some weird wicks on it. But I look at this level is probably where Apu returns back to. It was the strongest support, resistance flip. It was the bottom of that nuke wick. When that nuke wick happened, I mentioned this as it was rising. I said it's probably going to come back there at some point. It's been super slow at getting there, but I think it will eventually make its way there. And when it starts to build back up from that, that's when you're looking at, again, when it's over here, that's when it starts to become more enticing for a run at all-time high and beyond. And that's if it's going to do it at all. But I look at that and I think, is this, after, being in a daily bands uptrend for 60 days, 2 months, and we're now like 2 weeks into the downtrend, is that going to end? No. I think we're just beginning on many of these. I think we're just beginning. So those are the current thoughts on those few coins. And I'll be watching them, charting them, trade of the day. They'll definitely be mentioned in future for any trades I take on them. And of course, any other coins. Right? Be looking across the market. But I think the next broad altcoin rally is going to wait. It's going to have to wait until Bitcoin makes a new all-time high, in my opinion, which can take a while. Bitcoin might spend more time itself consolidating. And I think that that's when alts will become most attractive from a trading perspective. And I'm not in a long-term holding mindset now. We've gone far enough into the bull where I'm now in a shorter-term, when I say short-term, multi-week swing trade mindset. And I think that if you're patient and you wait for the next big Bitcoin breakout, you will see decent multi-week swing trades develop. And that's it. GM, GM, GM.